Hey, last week I showed you a bar trick, which was how do you tell whether a colored product is all oak or has caramel in it. And I took a flashlight and I stuck it under it, and you can see when I'm using low gap whiskey, which is no caramel, you get this sort of bright golden color, no caramel whatsoever. And if you use a caramelized product, it tends to show red. Here's our old single barrel Muscat. We don't add any caramel to it, we just want this to be naturally just brandy and water. You can just see there's hardly any, just this light golden thing. But, if you're looking at our craft method brandy, we put a little bit, you can see there's just a touch how this is getting more sort of slanted towards orange. We put a touch of caramel in there. And I want to talk about why we do it, why people use caramel, and how you should go about it properly. Okay. Caramel has two purposes. One of it I don't regard as legitimate. It's just trying to fool people into thinking your brandy, for years and years and years, I'm going to say for a century, people who are marketing aged whiskeys and cognacs and armagnacs have tried to convince people that the darker the product, the older it is, and therefore the more valuable. And they've done such a good job that they're kind of stuck with it. So that some of the big cognac houses, they're selling XO, which they're claiming to be 20 years old, or they're aging it in vertical uprights. It really doesn't have much color at all, and so they have to add a ton of caramel to it to convince, to keep convincing people that the product is old and valuable. And you can actually, in a lot of XOs from the major cognac houses, you can smell the caramel in the product, which to me is a defect. But there's a legitimate reason to use caramel, which is if you have a product that you're selling year after year, and you have two bottles which from aging are two different colors. They're different colors because the product in the one you just bottled, the one you're about to bottle, has picked up less oak in the aging process. If you put them on the shelf, not just the consumer, but the guy who's owning the store or the person who's running the bar or the salesperson for your distributor is going to just assume that there's something wrong with one of them because they're supposed to be an identical product. And I'm going to show you, this is a Sauvignon Blanc and a French Colombard. They're both from 2012, but you can see the one on the right has picked up, immeasurably more oak. That's because we want it to be an oakier product. We think French Colombard's fruitier. It stands up to having a little more oak in it. The Sauvignon Blanc is a little spicier, a little subtler, and we want to have a slightly diminished amount of oak. But let's say we're doing the Coast Road Reserve. That's where these end up. And you can see if we just use these the way they were and assembled a blend on which this Coast Road Reserve was based, you would have a lighter brand that's what's in the bottle. So what we do here is put a little, I'm going to say 1/100% or 1/10% in between that two of it to a product that's as light as this, so that it comes out at the same color, so that the next time we bottle this product, if you have on the shelf two different bottles of Coast Road Reserve, which was bottled in separate years, they look exactly the same. And that way our consumers are happy, our distributors are happy, their salespeople are happy, the guy that owns the store, the guy that owns the bar, the bartender, they all think that we're providing with a consistent product. Because I guarantee you, we've had this happen, that if there's two products with the same label or different color, everybody assumes there's something lesser, there's something wrong, there's something diminished in one of them. It's either too dark or too light. So, all right, how do we go about this? This is a bottle of caramel from a supplier in, where are these guys? In Illinois. We get most of our stuff, I just brought this out as a sample, we get most of our stuff from a man named Pecnair, who supplies the major cognac houses. We bring it in France. And it comes in a small quantity. A bottle like this would color a tank as big as this. Caramel has got a very intense coloration factor. What we do with it is we take a barrel of one of our brandies, freshly made, and we make a slightly over strength caramel solution in that barrel, and then we let it age 5, 6, 10, 20, 25 years. So that when we're adding it to the product, we're not just adding caramel, we're adding a brandy that is stronger in caramel, but that has been aged consistent with the product we're blending, and using that to darken it. And as I say, at very low quantities. Some of them so long we wouldn't even have to report it to the feds in our formula if we didn't feel like it. So I want to show you, this is a bottle. These are two different brandies from that were distilled in the year 2000. And you can see that this one is slightly darker than the other one. And next to it are the two bottles that we pulled from 2012. And you can see that the 2000, the ones that were distilled in 2000 that have been 10 more years in, or 12 more years in oak than these, are considerably darker. And you can imagine what happens when you try to blend these together. Before you blend, you really don't know what your final color is going to be. So after it's been blended and we brought it down to pretty close to the strength we're going to bottle it at, we add a little bit of caramel if it's going to be Coast Road Reserve. The blend is lighter than the Coast Road Reserve. We will then add some of that dilute caramel solution to the blend, so that when we put this bottle out with this label on it, the one that we bottled last year will look exactly the same as the one we bottled this year. And I brought here's a bottle of French Colombard. This was distilled in 1988. It's 24 years old. It's lighter than these that were distilled in the year 2000. How can that be? This was always put in barrels that have been used considerably, because we were trying to bring out we were trying to age a product that would be very delicate after now 24 years of aging, and that would not be able to carry a lot of oak. So you're looking at differences that occur from using essentially the same strength product, the same strength brandy, in different barrels, new barrels, older barrels, very old barrels, producing brandies that have different color. And the only way you can adjust that at the final bottling, if you want consistency in your product, is to add a little bit of caramel to it. And again, what I was saying is, this is something we only produce 36 cases of, we don't care whether it's consistent with the bottle next to it, so we add no caramel whatsoever. When we came out with the XO in 1996, we released this in 1996 for the first time, and Robb Report's panel of experts picked it that year as being the best distilled spirit they knew of, ahead of Macallan 18-year-old, ahead of the Richard Hennessy $1,200 bottling of extremely old cognac. And when we were putting this out on the market, we were faced with a problem, which was it was actually just about this color from the natural oak we put into it. And that's about as much oak as we wanted to put into what at the time was a 13 or 14-year-old product. You're creating a balance between the oak and the flavors of the brandy. You want to get just right. And so we were very worried that we're going out and we're trying to sell this for $100, which at the price was probably 10 times as much as standard California brandy was being sold for. It had to be sort of perceived as being legitimately worth $100, and we felt that we should add about 0.05% of caramel to it to make it dark enough so that when you held it up next to a bottle of Hennessy XO or a bottle of Courvoisier XO or a bottle of Delamare or a bottle of Hein, that it would be not perceived as being extra light, because if our distributors and salespeople and the guys that own liquor stores didn't believe the product was worth $100, nothing would happen. So we added a little caramel to it. And once we had done that, we had no choice year after year, because every time we bottled some new XO, it was going to end up at some point on a shelf next to a bottle of the XO we bottled the year before. We had to consistently add about that same amount of caramel to it. So you can see that, right? You see that little rosy glow. It's not, I wish I had a bottle of one of the major XOs to them. Those things just glow this deep red, almost maroon color. But that's what, 0.05% of caramel will do to a brandy that starts out like that. And then I'll go show you a couple of the barrels that we use to age our caramel. But that's the caramel story. Okay, so what kind of caramel do you use? Caramel is a sort of like viscous substance, which I'm holding a bottle right here of a sample from another company. This is not the one we buy ordinarily, but you can see how thick it is and dark and dense, and it just has this sort of like, doesn't smell like much. I mean, you really don't want to sort of like, you have to add a lot of caramel to a product before you can detect it in your mouth or in your nose, and we certainly don't use that much. But we actually get ours from, I've got these sticky hands, but we actually get our caramel from this guy, Pecnair, who's located in Marpin outside of Cognac. That happens to be the same town where we got our cognac still, where the abandoned distillery was. But here's his text sheet on the product, and what we like about his products is that they are very clean, and I've highlighted here, product made from sucrose, cane sugar, and water. No manufacturing reactant is used, GMO free. That means a lot to us. We get very good, very clean product, and we hardly use any of it. This bottle right here would be enough to appreciably deepen the color of a tank of brandy as big as this. We use something between 1/100th and 5/100ths of a percent when we're using it to color our brandies. Hey, most of our barrels with caramel solution in them are hidden behind this row of, temporarily behind this row of fresh distillate. This is a 2008 apple brandy that we added caramel to immediately after we made it. And we also, over time, brought it down to a low percentage. It's 39.24%. Here's the 25 gallons at 39.24%. So if we have to make a last-minute color adjustment, this is what we use. This is a small barrel. It's under 10 gallons, and what it has in it is French Colombard from 1990 with the caramel added. And so we now have a product that's a distillate that's coming up on being 24 years old, with a fairly strong in caramel, so that if we need to adjust one of our older brandies, we have a product that's congruent with that. So this is a 24-year-old caramel and brandy solution.